our fellowships, we try to respond to the gaps in the Kenyan media. The newsrooms are not giving the journalists enough time to look for the data, to investigate it, and to take time and go do the stories so that they can do in-depth stories. And therefore, we decided that the fellowship, the 4-month fellowship in 2013 would be about data journalism.
I realized that data journalism is basically telling the story behind the numbers, explaining what the numbers mean, and in a very simple way.
The data is the one that kind of tells you the story, or it points you towards where the story is, yeah? So that you find, how do you explain what you see? And then there lies the story. Not an issue of you deciding the story, then you go and look for data just to support the story.
When he comes back home, it is a scramble between his children and the goats. Each wants a piece.
The 2 stories I did, the one on unsafe abortion and contraceptive use, and the one on droughts and malnutrition. So many stories have been told, and they are not new topics. But what made them really unique in my case is because I used data in the stories. So for me, 1, the data gave me a unique angle to tell stories that have always been told. And then 2, the data gave strength to my story.
The first story I worked on was a series on health financing. This was just, the story was basically about finding if the new county governments had responded to the health priorities.
And each of those stories got massive reaction in the way the editors and media managers in the newsroom reacted to them. Some were running a series for several days, others were getting up to 10 minutes on TV.
As much as the whole process of getting to learn about data and telling stories using the data was exemplary and amazing on its own, I think the most interesting and the most fulfilling bit of it was the impact and the help that was given to the people I featured in my stories. And also just seeing legislatures and people in non-governmental organizations and even the government come up and discuss a story and help create a positive impact from it.
The readers nowadays don't have lots of time to read through the story. So once you put together the picture charts to represent what you want to what the story is about, it helps even the reader easily get in a way attracted to the story, then goes to the numbers, then reads the story.
A reader, for example, when you give them so much data in terms of figures, their brain gets confused. But when you give less content and a visualization, the brain better understands. And they don't have to read a lot. They can just look at the visualization and a few lines of literature to understand what you are trying to put across.
The graphics help the reader into understanding, have an in-depth understanding into the story.
The media houses, because they are not used to using visualization, sometimes they usually want to downplay the infographics. But in this fellowship, I think because the journalists kept in touch with their editors and kept consulting, even the visualization part of their project got a lot of space.
The first thing that I found very interesting was the ability to actually, in a team, to come up with a news application. I think that's something that I can take as one of the biggest highlights for me for the 4 months, because on our website you'll find that it is the only project or the only series that has a tab.
So what this news app does is you select your county and click on a button called View. Then when you do that, it shows you the health expenditure of that particular county. And then it goes further and visualizes the expenditure from over several years.
Data is one of the most difficult things, especially in I can say developing countries to get. In the first place, there are some sectors that there is just no data, and two, the biggest problem is that even where there is the data that has been done, the bureaucracy and the process of getting it really makes it very difficult for anybody to get it.
A lot of it is still in hard copies in the various institutions where you want to go get it. It's not in the open data platforms which you can access online, for example. But it's easier than most people who've not tried it think. When the journalist and the other fellows in the team got skills to scrape, it also gave them access to data that is in PDFs, that usually you go, it's a bulky PDF, you can't even find the data, but because they were able to scrape, they began to realize there's much more online than they thought.
I have realized there are so many untold stories that are out there, but they are simply just there in government records, in data that nobody is paying attention to. So instead of breaking a bank to look for a story, I just sit and wait for the data to tell me what the story is, and I go look for it. I feel more that I tell more truthful stories. Here is a case whereby you know very well that the data is the one that has told you the story, so you more or less feel the story has been guided and the story is truthful.
For our fellowship to work and for us to illustrate to the newsrooms on how it should work, we had to incorporate a developer and an infographic person into the fellowship.
At the beginning, it was like we were all speaking different languages. The graphic designer was speaking one language, the developer was speaking another language, and the journalists were speaking another language. And there were a lot of misunderstandings, and we built things that we didn't mean to build at all.
At first, it was challenging because I'm not used to this kind of a setup. But eventually, we slowly eased into each other, and the final product was amazing.
I think it was a fantastic and a thrilling 4 months for everyone. It's kind of like it was a regular newsroom just doing something that nobody has done before. And I think everyone felt that energy, and everyone was really open-minded and willing to work together.
From the great successes and some of the challenges, this year we are tailoring our program to go even bigger. We are in fact going to have a data and investigative journalism fellowship, and we are going to have it even for a longer period, because we are determined to see that data journalism becomes widespread in the Kenyan media.
The stories I presented, all of them were well used, and there was a lot of support for them, and now there's even more appetite for the stories that are generated from data.
Well, Kenya really has a head start on data journalism because it does have such a thriving media market and also has a very big tech community. Our editors have realized it's worth giving them the time and resources to invest in data journalism, and having these very successful stories come out right at the end of the fellowship really means that they weren't just data journalists for 4 months, that they can make a career in data journalism.
For me, it is more like, how do I make sure that data journalism becomes a mainstay? Becomes recognized. It becomes like what everybody else wants to do.
This is where journalism is going.